Yet again, trying to decide what kind of lighting I want for this. I just think I'm gonna have to do indirect, like soft lighting. I fucking love the straight on, but it's unsustainable. Cannot film in that shit, so gonna have to work with this. It's crazy to actually think that I'm filming this Jupiter in Aries video because I remember filming my Jupiter in Pisces video a year ago when visiting Dubai. And now I am in New York, but I'm about to head to Barcelona and then Dubai again, and I'll be moving to Dubai in like a year whenever my place is ready. Somewhat, like splitting my time, which is just crazy to think about time. I don't know. Whatever. I just remember fucking filming that video and having people still comment on it today and thinking of what a different place I was in then than I am now. And looking back, I'm kind of proud of a lot of those predictions in the way that they landed, especially the art-related predictions, because I predicted a crazy art market and NFT run, and the Beeple sale of like a $69 million NFT and just the crazy NFT bubble, but also the interesting things that I did not fully anticipate, like Bitcoin and the crypto market nuking during the exact periods that Jupiter is in Pisces, May until July, and then now December until May likely. So that's a cool point for my data set that Jupiter entering Pisces tends to be fucking terrible for crypto. So with that long ass intro out of the way, apologies, I'm usually concise. Let's get into this video on Jupiter in Aries. If you're excited to hear about what we can expect for the year ahead with Jupiter in Aries over the summer and then 2023, do make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you are always up to date with what the stars have in store for you. So this is a rundown of my predictions for the world for Jupiter in Aries. Going to start out with a TLDR overview, an abstract, if you will, then explaining Jupiter, explaining Aries, and explaining what Jupiter and Aries means together. We'll go through the past 3 transits, or the 3 years that Jupiter was in Aries previously, and what kind of events happened there to compare, and then we'll apply those significations to today's events in order to predict what will happen during Jupiter and Aries for 2022 and 2023. Thank you to Celsius for partnering with me on this video again. And as many of you have heard or have asked me about, there are changing measures for US users. Coins transferred to Celsius by US users before April 15th, 2022 have no changes. They will continue to earn rewards, as will transfers to Celsius by accredited US investors or non-US investors. But new transfers by non-accredited US investors will be held in custody accounts where they will not earn rewards. But you will still be able to buy, swap, and transfer. However, it's still my home for crypto along with 1.7 million other people. We trust that it has tools designed to fit our goals, whether that is retiring early, saving for a family, or, like me, just kind of wanting to have a comfortable life. And I'm excited to mention that buying on Celsius actually got a bit easier. So Celsius already charges no fees, but they have a new buy feature that allows you to buy USDC from anyone, and you can swap USDC fee-free on Celsius to any other token. This will be rolling out to select US users soon. So when people ask me nowadays where I'm putting my crypto, given that the market is so volatile and their security risks, I tell them Celsius. I'm holding stable coins mainly, and excitingly, there are several promos happening as well. Like how you could earn up to $500 on your next Celsius loan, or up to $600 in Luna. So check those out down below. Anyway, like I said, 3 parts. First explaining the astrology, then talking about the history of it, and thirdly talking about what is expected to come. So if you're new here, hello, I am Maren. I'm an astrologer. I use the tropical zodiac in Western techniques, and I use whole sign houses. And I'm excited to get into this. So firstly, what is Jupiter? Jupiter is the largest planet. It is a huge gas giant. It has a fuck ton of moons. And as a meme, it is the Oprah, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car meme. It's the giver. It's the planet of abundance, growth, optimism, increase. And it's known as the greater benefic because it's the bigger cute planet. Venus is the lesser benefic because it's the smaller cute planet. And Jupiter relates to more wisdom, more experience, more large-scale growth, while Venus is like food, sex, pleasure, etc. You can learn more about what the planets mean in my planets and astrology video if you'd like, which is linked below. But planets are actors, and when they're put into a sign, it's like an actor playing a role. So all of astrology is really fundamentally based around the planets because those are the building blocks that then go into the signs, which then apply to the houses. So Jupiter, growth, inflation, increase, usually in a good way, sometimes in a cancerous or unwanted way. Think Jupiter conjunct Saturn, Pluto in the South Node in Capricorn, coinciding with the COVID-19 start, but usually Jupiter is good, usually. Now, what is Aries as a sign? Not only is Aries the first sign of the entire zodiacal year, as you can learn more about in my signs in astrology video, but it is a cardinal fire sign. So a cardinal sign starts off the season. Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn are the 4 cardinal signs that start seasons, and therefore our leaders, our initiators, are more set and more able to start things rather than continue on or be dependable in the middle of things. They're the self-starters, they're the motivators. And it is a fire sign focused on creativity, emotions that lead to actions, and being assertive and aggressive. This time of year is the time of year where spring is starting. The weather is getting hotter, so there's an energy of kicking off heat, and therefore Aries is the sign of courageous individualism, as I like to say, or empowered impulsivity. The aim is not sustainability. The aim is not to be consistent. The aim is to kick something off that other parties can then continue on with. People with Aries placements, no matter their age, are often childlike with the impulsivity or, dare I say, naivete and purity in which they act, but they tend to be great soldiers and great leaders for more aggressive topics. They are ruled by the planet Mars, the planet of war itself, so there's a hot, very fast-acting quality to Aries people. They tend to say yes, but also need a lot of sleep because their energy is not sustainable. Aries as an archetype for world events is sudden and very catalytic. I immediately think of the Arab Spring, where Uranus moved into Aries, and Uranus is not Jupiter, Uranus is more destabilizing, more sudden. But TLDR, the Arab Spring was a major world event in around 2010, where much of the Arab world and countries in the Middle East had their citizens fighting for free speech, leading protests, revolts, uprisings that wanted more free speech. It was pro-democracy, it was pro-individualism. And when Uranus was in Aries as well, Bitcoin emerged and was on the scene, which is an example of, again, individualism, sovereignty, suddenly destabilizing the idea of what the self and what the self can be empowered by. Because if you're not familiar, when you hold Bitcoin, you have control of your money, unless someone has a gun to your head demanding your seed phrase to unlock it. Like, it's not like US dollars where the bank can freeze things. Like, you own your Bitcoin, it's worth money, that's sovereign, that's individualistic, but you can learn more about that in my other videos. So, applying planet into a sign and coming out with a prediction can be basically a first order logic equation, where Jupiter, growth, plus Aries, individualism, impulsivity, can equal the growth of individualism, the rise of the self, more priority on the self. And that can sound a little weird, but in practice, when we apply it to the previous cases and see what the back testing of these events basically is, it'll make a little bit more sense. Jupiter takes 12 years to orbit around the entire zodiac, which means that the last 3 times Jupiter was in Aries were 1987, 1999, and 2010. So for backtesting events, I generally look at the Wikipedia page, scan all of the major defining events for that year. I then take note of the major ones. I cross-reference that with accounts of the actual events themselves. And from those that seem to check out, I use those as a defining data set for what that year applied to. So off the bat, the major themes for Jupiter and Aries that I found were 1, sudden violence, especially explosions or armed uprisings. 2, people's rebellions and uprisings that specifically revolved around free speech or removal of censorship. Or thirdly, tech advancements that allow for growth of individuality or user experience on a more immediate, like, I want this level. And overall, with a lot of this, free speech enthusiasm is at the center of it, wanting to be seen and acknowledged. So let's get into the literal examples. First, with the first time we're going to look at for Jupiter and Aries, which was March 2nd, 1987 until March 8th, 1988. So March 4th, President Reagan, like right after this happened, President Reagan addresses the American people on the Iran-Contra affair, acknowledging that his overtures to Iran had deteriorated into an arms for hostages deal. So hostage situations, frankly, are another repeating theme here. March 7th, 1987 was the Liu massacre in China, and that is the first example here. There are so many armed massacres, much more than other periods and other Jupiter transits, I have to be honest. March 24th, 1987, Michael Eisner, CEO of Disney and the French Prime Minister at the time, signed an agreement to construct the now Disneyland Paris, which is very Jupiter in Aries. That same day was the largest attendance for the WWE until 2010. April 13th, Portugal returned Macau to China. Throughout the spring, there were an enormous amount of massacres and armed uprisings. Just, you can look into it, massive number that spring. June 12th, during a visit to Berlin, President Reagan challenged Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall. June 30th, Canada introduces a $1 coin nicknamed the loonie. That felt very Jupiter and Aries, like Jupiter wealth and then Aries won. July 1st, the Single European Act is passed by the European Community, and the act set the European Community in an objective of establishing a single market by December 31st, 1992, which feels very Jupiter and Aries, like one market. August 4th, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, rescinds and removes the fairness doctrine, which had required radio and TV stations to present alternative views on controversial subjects. They removed the show the other side doctrine. September 7th, the world's first conference on artificial life is held in the US. October 3rd, the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement is reached but requires ratification. This later became NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Jupiter and Aries, the growth of just more direct, streamlined, singular transmission. November of 1987 was a really, really violent month. On November 18th, for one, there was a King's Cross fire on the London Underground. It injured over 100 people and killed 31. And the Iran-Contra affair, the US Senate and House panels released reports charging Ronald Reagan with the ultimate responsibility for the affair. December, fluoxetine, marketed as Prozac, is approved for use as an antidepressant. Like, Aries rules the head, the brain. February 12th, 1999 until June 28th, 1999, and then again October 23rd, 1999 until February 14th, 2000 was the next transit of Jupiter in Aries. February 12th, the day that this occurred, the day that this transit started, President Bill Clinton is acquitted in impeachment proceedings in the US Senate. February 16th, there was an assassination attempt at the president in Uzbekistan, and across Europe, Kurdish rebels take over embassies and hold hostages after Turkey arrests one of their rebel leaders. March 6, 1999, Alex Jones creates InfoWars. March 12th, former Warsaw Pact members Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic join NATO. March 24th, NATO launches airstrikes against Yugoslavia, marking the first time NATO has attacked a sovereign state. April was the Kosovo War. June 1st, Napster debuts, and that would inspire other file-sharing sites like LimeWire, Gorilla, Cosmorpheus, uTorrent. June 18th, the government of Colombia announces it will include the estimated value of the country's illegal drug crops, exceeding $500 million in its gross national product. June 19th, in the Kosovo War, Yugoslavia and NATO signed a peace treaty to end hostilities. October 27th, gunmen opened fire in the Armenian parliament, killing the prime minister and parliament chairman, and 6 other members. January 10th, America Online announces an agreement to purchase Time Warner for $162 billion, the largest ever corporate merger. February 5th, the Second Chechen War had the Novye Aldi massacre, where Russian forces somewhere executed 50 to 60 civilians in a suburb of Grozny. And then February 6th, in the Second Chechen War, the Battle of Grozny occurred, with Russian forces concluding the capture of the Chechen capital, Grozny. In Russia's chart, Jupiter in Aries is crossing its midheaven, which generally is expansion or growth of what it's known for. Then the third time, and the most recent time Jupiter was last in Aries, were June 6, 2010 until September 8th, 2010, then January 22nd, 2011 to June 4th, 2011. July 16th, 2010, the first Instagram posts were made by the developers, and the service launched publicly on October 6th. So the first posts were made even though Instagram was not publicly released until after, but the first posts were made. That's the start date. July 23rd, One Direction is formed. Maybe we'll get another one this time. Maybe they're reuniting. Fingers crossed. My fucking biggest wish for this. July 25th, WikiLeaks, an online publisher of anonymous, covert, and classified material, leaks to the public over 90,000 internal reports about the United States-led involvement in the war in Afghanistan from 2004 to 2010. August 10th, the WHO declares the H1N1 influenza pandemic over, saying worldwide flu activity has returned to normal seasonal patterns. In my COVID 2021 video, I referenced this. I don't think it's going to be as clear of an ending announced because I think COVID is likely seasonal and recurring, but I do see that this is an indicator repeating that likely things will die down in terms of importance. September 22nd, Anonymous initiates Operation Payback, a coordinated cyber attack on multiple corporations, law firms, and politicians over the banning of file-sharing websites such as LimeWire and Private Bay, and also the attack against WikiLeaks. January 24, 37 people are killed and more than 180 others in a bombing at Domodedovo International Airport in Moscow. January 25th, the 2011 Egyptian Revolution begins, and February 15th, the first Libyan civil war begins. There was a huge amount of geopolitical instability in the Middle East during this early 2011 time. April 24th, the 2011 Guantanamo Bay files leak occurs. WikiLeaks and other orgs published over 770 classified documents about Guantanamo Bay, and it exposed that 150 innocent civilians from Afghanistan and Pakistan were held in camp without trial, and detainees were as young as 14. May 1st, President Obama announced that Osama bin Laden was killed, and June 4th, Chile's Huyahui volcano erupts, causing air traffic cancellations across all of the southern hemisphere, forcing 3,000 people to evacuate. So what stands out to me as much more explosive violence in other Jupiter transits. This is sudden, this is armed uprising, this is guerrilla often. And yes, all of these yearly rundowns will focus on more harmful or negative events because that is what stands out in the world for these years ahead generally. I left out a lot of the events that were just repetitions of guerrilla warfare or prominent random shootings because you get the point. There were also tech advancements that allowed for more user direct to the world or even narcissism. Thinking about things like the file sharing services Napster, Instagram, and the free speech emphasis, whether it is the Arab Spring or WikiLeaks. So what do I expect this to look like for us? Civil unrest and violence likely on a guerrilla and local level, both across the world and maybe even in the US when times are more difficult, thinking around elections, possibly around the midterms or other high stakes times. More single user innovations, similar to Airbnb or Uber or Instagram. A term that comes to mind that I learned through studying the aviation industry is the unbundling of services, where, for example, business class rates for airlines are getting lower because now you have to pay for services like food, Wi-Fi, luggage that you wouldn't normally. So the price gets lower and there's an unbundling of services where you're paying for exactly what you need. More direct to consumer. I expect the resistance to free speech censorship to grow massively, and I know that doesn't make a genius, but as you censor more people in an age of media allowing things to spread, you're gonna get pushback. People that I never thought would speak up against censorship are speaking up. Heavy state people that I thought were married to censor everyone. They're even speaking up about let's not take people out of context and shut them up. I'm in no means in agreement with a lot of what Tucker Carlson says, but there are far left vegan people I follow that are standing up for Tucker Carlson nowadays. People are seeing what's happening, just in terms of the media misrepresenting him, censoring him, turning him into not what he's saying. That's one example. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I will say people take him out of context like they do a lot of people who are not far left. Basically, if you're not far left, you're far right nowadays. Insane. So, similar to the Arab Spring and WikiLeaks, these things are building up to allow for more sudden explosive release of information, and I expect more civil uprisings against the state when they try to censor citizens. Especially near the end of this transit when Jupiter squares Pluto, especially even as it enters Taurus when it squares Pluto by sign, because Pluto will be in Aquarius when Jupiter moves into Taurus. May 2023. And there's been a lot of surface level fighting throughout the pandemic. Frankly, there's been a lot of online fighting about absolute nonsense. But I think that now with weak men making hard times and there being literal war in the world, people are a bit more woken up. And even though the US will likely not be the first examples of this, because the more totalitarian states that impose censorship will then get uprisings first, I do think it will likely bleed over. We've had a long time of peace and prosperity, and objectively speaking, it's lasted a really long time in history at this point, and a lot of us who are more familiar with war just based on me growing up with people that were in wars and shit, not that I by any means am and more than ignorant to this than any other people or anything like that, but I can say that it feels like we've arrived at this and it makes sense that things would not die down. For the market, Jupiter in Aries will cross Bitcoin's moon. First, early June 2022, then middle of September 2022, and finally end of January 2023, which should be a really positive transit, except the first hit in June 2022 is next to Mars, hitting Bitcoin's moon right as well alongside Jupiter, so I will say it looks a bit rough and good at the same time, very strange, very volatile. But it could be related to the fact that I think Jupiter in Aries, empowering self-sovereignty and free speech against the state, would be in line with the narrative for Bitcoin. Mars and Jupiter together is the growth of needing to be aggressive or assertive and take action. So I could see how the market is shaky due to the state actions, but also increases Bitcoin adoption in terms of the need for something that we own ourselves. Bitcoin will naturally become an appealing asset as people realize that government control over what you can and cannot do is not a good thing. That's why I tweeted out May 10th and October 28th for the year ahead, because those are the dates that Jupiter is in Aries and likely is expected to be some of the most bullish date range for the year ahead. Though initially I will say that when Jupiter ingresses into a sign, there is an initial dump. Anytime a planet ingresses into a new sign, there is a dump, often due to the world events being stark and definitory and shaking up the market. But I do expect Jupiter in Aries to be much more bullish for crypto than Jupiter in Pisces, and also for any companies that IPO that are about being direct to consumer. Think Airbnb, DoorDash, Uber equivalents. I don't know if direct to consumer is the right terminology, but more individualistic, like unbundling. In the United States' chart, this is not particularly active immediately. I mean, it is squaring the US Cancer stellium and opposing US Saturn and Libra, but it's not a crazy configuration as much as it could be. I think Jupiter in the 5th squaring planets in the 8th could look like frivolous spending, which I guess is expected. So in your own charts, you can look to your whole sign house of Aries to see what house topics will be growing. For those of you born during the day when the sun was out, this is even more positive. It's not quite as important for people born at night, even though it will still be good. It's just that for night people, Venus is a more positive planet. You can also watch your 2022 year ahead videos as I do them for every sign to see where this will be in your chart as I explain it, or watch your May rising sign forecast for a mention as well. Big thank you to Celsius for being the partner for this video, and thank you to watching. So if you did like this, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and let me know down below any thoughts, any predictions, and any feelings you have. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.
There is one